Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, let's get to the topic of the day in football, and it is a doozy. It's a big one. Obviously, look, if you listen to my work, you listen to my show, I don't talk a ton of NFL, but this story is huge, and it really is kind of the cross-section of the NFL, college, preseason, the draft, you name it. It is the cross-section of all angles of football. That is Tim Tebow. And Tim Tebow, we discussed him when it was first reported that he may get an invite to Jacksonville Jaguars training camp. We talked about him when he actually got the invite, when he got a one-year contract. We got him when his jersey sales were through the roof. We talked about it on this show. And we, of course, are going to talk about it today, as on Tuesday, Tim Tebow was officially cut from the Jacksonville Jaguars. When it happened, you know what the typical reaction was from 80% of people out there, or at least the vocal minority, if it's not the majority, and that was this: good for him, shame on him, he never deserved a shot anyway, shame on Urban Meyer, shame on Jacksonville for even giving him a shot. But instead, today, I want to do the opposite. One, as you know, I never really believed that. I always believed it was nonsense, that we should be mad that he was even getting a shot, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what I really want to do today is, rather than yell and scream and be mad that he even got a shot, what I want to do is take a moment, reflect, and appreciate Tim Tebow, because the reality is that, you know, this is probably the end of his professional career in professional sports as we know it. And if you listen to this show, if you follow my YouTube channel, if you follow my work anywhere, you know that from the beginning, I was never really that upset that Tim Tebow got a shot with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everybody was freaking out, and I just said, look, why is everyone getting so mad? All that ever happened 2-3 months ago when this story first started was reports and an eventual one-year contract that confirmed that Tim Tebow would have an opportunity to compete for a spot in Jacksonville Jaguars training camp. It wasn't a 10-year contract. It wasn't $40 million guaranteed. It was a contract no different than hundreds of other players got over the course of the summer. You just don't know about them because they're not former Heisman Trophy winners. They're not college football icons. But look, 32 teams in the NFL, all of them bring somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 or so players to training camp. Everybody knows you only get 53 guys on your active roster. And so there were literally hundreds of guys that got contracts no different than Tim Tebow did over the last few months. Never understood why it was such a big deal. Again, Urban Meyer did not give him $30 million guaranteed. Urban Meyer did not promise him a spot, at least not publicly, on the team. All he did was give Tim Tebow an opportunity to earn a spot on the team. Never had a problem, because it's no different than thousands of players over the course of the last decade, hundreds this year. What some people, of course, said to that of, well, you know, yeah, he got a shot, but he's been out of the league for 8 years, and it's so unfair. How about all the tight ends that have been working so hard to get this opportunity? People get weird opportunities all the time when they either haven't played the sport, when they've been away from the sport, whatever. You can go down the laundry list of guys. There are NFL tight ends who never played college football at all that got invites to training camps. You have rugby players that have gotten invites to training camps. So don't tell me that it's about all these poor tight ends that have been playing tight end for their whole life. We're supposed to feel terrible for them because Tim Tebow got another shot. We have football players, or we have basketball players that have never played football that get invites to training camp. We have basketball players that have never played a down of football that get spots on NFL rosters. Rico Gathers comes to mind. Jimmy Graham comes to mind. The list goes on and on. We also, by the way, have athletes who come back after not playing for a while and come back to play the sport that they once played. So when I heard Tim Tebow, well, he hasn't played for 8 years. Yeah, that happens all the time. First of all, in Tim Tebow's defense, two things. One, never forget, 7-8 years ago, we said, well, if he was just willing to play tight end, there would be a spot for him in the NFL. So first of all, we acknowledge that he was good enough to potentially be an NFL tight end, or at least that he should get a shot. So I never understood why it was so crazy that, oh my God, all these years later, he's getting a shot. It happens all the time. Guys leave. And in Tebow's defense, he was playing professional sports when he was not playing football. He was playing minor league baseball. He was training to be a professional athlete. And I understand it's different training, it's different this, it's different that, but the bottom line remains, it's not as though he was a guy sitting on the couch. Like, he was playing sports professionally. So God forbid that he took a few years off of football. By the way, happens all the time. You can think of a million examples. Magic Johnson, people forget, retires because you know why in 1990. He made a comeback 5 years later, hadn't played in the NBA. Now, I know Magic Johnson's an icon. I'm not comparing his talent to Tim Tebow, but took 5 years off, came back 5 years later. You go on and on down the list. Remember that 30 for 30 on Marcus Dupree, the great high school running back that never made it? Tried to make it as a pro, left football altogether, comes back 5 years later, plays 2 years in the NFL. There was a guy named Mike Williams who played at USC under Pete Carroll. Didn't work out, goes to the NFL, doesn't make it after a few years, leaves football. 4 years later, Pete Carroll brings him in to the Seattle Seahawks, gives him an opportunity. So this happens all the time. The idea that no athlete has ever stepped away from a sport and then gotten a shot 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, it happens all the time. And I never believe this nonsense about privilege either. Oh my God, it's so much privilege. I would argue Tim Tebow's actually the opposite of privilege. Never forget, Tim Tebow was a starting NFL quarterback who won his division and won a playoff game and never again got the opportunity to compete for a starting quarterback. He got the opportunity to compete. He never started again. Name me another quarterback in the history of the NFL that a year after leading his team to a division title in the playoffs never got another shot to be a starting quarterback. There are guys that 2, 3, 4 years down the road never got another shot. There are guys that lost the job the next year. I can't think of a single guy that won a division, won a playoff game, and never again got a shot to be a starting quarterback. And so stop with the privilege stuff, okay? And by the way, and this is the other thing I said when Tim Tebow signed, never forget, even if it was only because Tim Tebow knew Urban Meyer, this happens all the time. Coaches bring in players that they know will help build their culture in the locker room. As I said at the time, there's a reason that Derrick Rose, every time Tom Thibodeau gets a new job, he brings in Derrick Rose because Derrick Rose is great in the locker room. Udonis Haslem just signed for his 19th season in the NBA with the Miami Heat. Pat Riley loves him, wants him in the locker room, and so Tim Tebow's no different. The only difference is he didn't make the team. By the way, for people who would say, but he was, again, I just told you, Mike Williams played at USC under Pete Carroll, goes to the NFL, it doesn't work out. 4 years later, Pete Carroll brings it back. So don't give me the privilege stuff. And so what I want to do now, now that you got me all fired up, I said I wasn't going to yell and scream. What I want to do now is look back, just on Tebow, because I do think that when this happened, by the way, I do think it is pretty funny, by the way, last little side tangent on Tebow, but I do think it's pretty funny that we do have all these people on social media, we have to respect athletes' mental health and all that stuff, and, Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, and for the record, I agree 100%. I did think it was interesting, though, that the second Tebow gets cut, people want to tear him down, and he didn't deserve. It's like, well, do we care about mental health or not? I don't really understand how you can, talk about how we need to work on mental health, and then the exact opposite happens when Tim Tebow gets cut. You celebrate it. You celebrate a guy's career potentially coming to an end. And that really was what, I guess, Tuesday afternoon's story was, is that I do believe that Tim Tebow, this is probably the end as we know it of Tim Tebow's athletic career at any kind of high level. If you want to argue, he hasn't played at a high level really since about 2011, 2012, 2013 with the Broncos, Jets, and Patriots. I won't argue with you on it, but I do think that this is probably it, right? Didn't work as a quarterback, leaves the NFL, gives minor league baseball a shot for 4 years, doesn't work in minor league baseball, comes back, takes a shot at training camp, doesn't work out with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Think we can assume he's never going to be a Major League Baseball player. Think we can assume that he is never going to make an NFL roster if he couldn't make the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so what I want to do now is take a moment and just appreciate Tim Tebow for who he was, what he stood for, what he was about, and the fact that, basically his career is probably over. Because like I said a minute ago, when something like this happens, there were a lot of people celebrating, oh my goodness, he never deserved this shot in the first place. You know who didn't seem to be bothered by the news on Tuesday afternoon? It was Tim Tebow himself. I saw him release a nice statement. I saw him say, I chased my dream as far as it could go. I gave it everything I had, and I leave the field knowing it. I don't know if that's the exact statement, but you kind of get the emphasis of what he's trying to say. And as he steps away from sports likely for the rest of his career, what I just want to do is I want to give Tim Tebow a quick shout out. Because this was a guy that basically since he first stepped on the field at Florida, he's had haters, he's had doubters, he's had people, and every step of the way, he's just kept grinding. Now, has it worked out the way that we all thought it would when he was at Florida? Going to go to the NFL, going to be a huge success, going to be an NFL, whatever, Pro Bowler, Hall of Famer? No, it hasn't. But at the same time, think about who Tim Tebow was. Goes to the NFL, gets a starting job, leads his team to the playoffs, and as I said a minute ago, never got another shot to be an NFL starting quarterback. Some guys that would tear at him, it would gnaw at him, they would, they couldn't get out of bed. I don't know if that's a slight exaggeration, but not by much. Tebow, what does he do? He keeps grinding, he keeps fighting, it doesn't work out, takes a shot at baseball. You can criticize Tebow, he only got a shot because, he was a really good high school baseball player. Did he probably get a shot because he is a prominent, famous ex-athlete? Yes, but again, he played professional sports at a really high level in football, and so this happens all the time. Plays baseball, doesn't make it, rides buses in the minor leagues for 4 or 5 years, tries, doesn't get past AA, AAA, goes back to football in a role where he is, essentially we call it in basketball a role player, but he humbled himself to the point that he showed up at training camp as a guy knowing Tim Tebow could make millions doing nothing related to sports, just doing speaking, doing TV, doing whatever. But instead, he showed up because he loved football that much and he wanted one more shot to make an NFL roster and to play the sport that he loves. It didn't work out, but again, as I said, I think a lot of people sit back and what a failure. He tried baseball and it didn't work, and he tried football and it didn't work. What a loser. And it's no, it's actually the exact opposite. One, he played sports at a level higher than basically any of us will ever play, and he did 2 of them at a really high level. Played baseball at the AAA level, played in the NFL, was a starting quarterback in the NFL. By any tangible measurement other than what we define Tim Tebow by, he was a roaring success in both sports, certainly football. But what's more impressive to me and what I like about it even more is that he didn't listen to the doubters. He didn't listen to the haters. He chased those dreams because it was what he wanted. Again, he was going to make millions of dollars off the field this year if he never stepped foot in Jacksonville training camp. I don't know how much he gets paid to do speeches, but I guarantee it's a lot more than most people do. Obviously, he has a job at ESPN whenever he wants it for college football, SEC Network, all that stuff. But he gave it one more shot. He did it. He humbled himself to try to chase his dreams. And I have absolutely no problem with it. I appreciate Tim Tebow. I respect what he's done. He hasn't listened to the haters. He hasn't listened to the doubters. And I just respect the fact that he tried, and that he gave it his all, and that he stayed true to himself. He didn't care what anybody else said. His dream was to pursue a football deal, many years after people said it couldn't be done, and obviously baseball as well. And even though it didn't work out, like I said, I believe he played at a much higher level than just about any of us going forward. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a quick favor. Subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. Hit that red subscribe button. Also, make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram.